But there's often a chasm the size of the Grand Canyon between somebody knowing what to do and actually being able to facilitate it.
Thanks for sharing that, and let's dig a little bit deeper into this. So before someone even starts thinking about changing their diet, you've taught me that there's a lot of preparation work that goes into this process. Could you talk a little bit about preparing your environment and setting realistic expectations? Could you walk us through this a little bit?
Yeah, I would say that it's really twofold. On one side of the ledger is figuring out all the practical stuff, right? How do I compose shakes? How do I compose pretty aggressively anti-inflammatory meal? And then the other side of the ledger really addresses the more psychological component. In other words, the more cognitive component. So oftentimes, and this used to be the standard, certainly in my line of work, a patient would come into a clinic and they'd walk out with just a sheet of paper. And you'd say, come back and see me in a month. And I realized in pretty short order, there is a chasm often the size of the Grand Canyon between patients knowing what to do. Okay, I'm looking, and this is to your point, Swamy, about, anybody could look online for a diet, right? But there's often a chasm the size of the Grand Canyon between somebody knowing what to do and actually being able to facilitate it, right? What are the things that are standing between me and a more optimum result? And that, as it turns out, is a lot of where the work is. But I typically tee the ball up by explaining what an ideal plate looks like, how to compose shakes, the importance of integrating shakes if a patient is open to it. It's sort of interesting to me because often there's a little bit of pushback in the beginning for having a meal replacement. And at the end of this initial phase, this 2-week period, people are asking me if they can extend this period or how can I include shakes, because they're really convenient and nutrient dense. But so I also outline what an ideal plate looks like, how you have to organize your environment. We know from the world of food psychology that your environment looms very large in terms of success. How do I navigate other eaters in my household, right? What am I going to prepare for my spouse, for my children, while I approach a shift in my own diet? Then I would say on the other side of the ledger is, how do I manage cravings? What do I do if I'm hungry? How do I identify what in my life is more important than a handful of nuts at 3:00 in the afternoon or indulging in a craving, right? Really, I always ask people, why'd you pick up the phone to call me, right? What in your life is going on, and why now that you've decided to take greater agency over your health? So I find that it's really this combination of practical, sort of on the ground, right? What do I need to do in order to get my meals in order? And then how do I actually manage all the psychological stuff that I would say comes up for almost everyone? I do work with a few, I would say, outliers who are super motivated. They have a lot of resolve. Just give me that sheet of paper and I'm going to comply with it. But that's really in the minority. But that's typically how I get started.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. I think the preparation is so key to success, especially long-term success, and having that conversation up front, knowing exactly what one's motivations are, perhaps having reminders of what our motivations are as we go through this process. Obviously, it's not an easy process, otherwise everyone would be able to implement it, and having an expert guide get us through this is so important.